What a difference a couple weeks can make. A suddenly rosy outlook for Missouri football. The ranked Missouri Tigers went from, well, a lot of fans wanting to fire everybody to suddenly we're talking ourselves into a really special season. So let's talk about that, especially a very much improved Brady Cook as well, and more coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and these days every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And again, is it just not incredible what we're talking about a couple weeks later? After that Middle Tennessee game, hey, I was feeling about as down as anybody out there on the Mizzou internet, except for the people who I guess were wanting to fire everybody after the game and saying that we were going to go 2-10 on the rest of the season, lose 10 consecutive ball games. Well, indeed, Missouri has won 2 consecutive ball games, 4 overall, of course, to start the season here. Missouri 23rd now in the AP poll, 22nd in the coaches poll. And I tell you what, I hate to look past Vanderbilt, but that LSU game all of a sudden looking more winnable by the second. Certainly much more winnable than it did at the beginning of the season. If you saw LSU just barely edged out Arkansas, a 3-point victory down in the Bayou. But you know what? You can't look past Vanderbilt. Obviously, Missouri has not played all that well the last couple seasons. Certainly hasn't won convincingly against the Commodores the last couple of years. And man, after starting 4-0, LSU game is sold out. Boy, losing to Vanderbilt in Nashville this Saturday, that would be quite the kick in the groin, wouldn't it? So I think if you're Eli Drinkwitz, I think that may be what I'd be opening up my remarks with on Monday, reminding my team, just getting that into their heads, saying, I want you guys to actually think what it would be like if we lost to Vanderbilt this week. I want to catch their attention really fast because, you know what? This team is probably riding a little bit high right now. All of a sudden, Missouri fans are very excited about this team. We're 4-0 for the first time in a long time. And like I said before, suddenly the rest of the SEC is looking pretty relatively vulnerable outside of Georgia, I would say. Even Georgia maybe not up to quite its lofty standards. I'm still putting them quite obviously in a tier above everybody else in the conference, certainly in the SEC East as well. And I've talked a lot about how there just seems to be this big fat quagmire, as I've called it, in the SEC East right now. At least at this moment, to me, throw Missouri, Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, and even Tennessee now into that hopper. Well, for all intents and purposes, even though they're in the SEC West, these are Missouri opponents as well. You might as well throw Arkansas and LSU in there as well. So you've got 6 ball games to me that are basically toss-ups at this point. So could Missouri win all of those games? Absolutely. They could also lose all of them as well. Now, Vanderbilt, a little bit different. I'm going to say the Tigers are going to win this Saturday for sure. In fact, over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Tigers opened as 11-point favorites. It's been steadily climbing in Missouri's direction. Missouri now 13-point favorites in Nashville. Of course, we'll have to just see where it settles by kickoff, but it is a little bit worrisome. Missouri a little banged up going into this week. Darius Robinson left in the first quarter after playing some impressive snaps, by the way, when you go back and watch it. So that was tough to see. Luther Burden left early, eventually came back in the ball game. You know, there's just obviously Ennis Rakestraw, is the one you're most worried about if you're Missouri right now. Hopefully he can be back for this Vanderbilt game. No question about that. Obviously, some impressive team numbers there so far for your Missouri Tigers and some impressive individual numbers, too. Well, Missouri employee now, Dave Matter, put out on his Twitter feed, Brady Cook, now the second highest quarterback rating in the SEC so far. Cody Schrader, your leading rusher in terms of total yards in the conference. Luther Burden, third in the SEC and fourth in the Power 5 conferences overall in terms of receiving yardage per game. So this Missouri offense right now has gone from looking pedestrian to looking quite above average, I would say, after the last couple weeks. Because while Memphis, I would say, is an average defense, they aren't a pushover by any means. Certainly Kansas State has an above average defense, I would say. And regardless, it just looks different right now for Missouri. The offense they're running more. They're just attacking. There's more opportunities down the field, number one. And while I certainly suggested in the lead up to the Kansas State game that I'd like to see more play action from Missouri against Kansas State, well, it seems like in general play action has been something that's really opened up this Missouri offense. Against Memphis on play action fakes, Brady Cook was 10 of 12 for 243 yards and 2 touchdowns. Of course, the early long ball there, about 76 yards, I believe, to Speedy Johnson, who indeed is a speedy young man. No question about that. Missouri with Johnson, with Luther Burden, with Theo Weiss, and maybe even Mookie Cooper as well. You've got at least 3 or 4 guys who can win and get open downfield. How many colleges are that deep at defensive back that they can shut down that many explosive players down the field? And the good news is, guess what? They seem like they have a quarterback who can get them the football all of a sudden too in Brady Cook, because here's a guy who all of a sudden looks like, to me, just a completely different player than he's looked in the first couple weeks and for most of his career here, I would say. And let's actually bring up a snap here. I think this play in particular shows exactly what I was talking about in my post-game wrap-up, that Cook is playing with great confidence and anticipation. You bring up this formation here, stacked receivers to both sides of the field. He's going to throw it over here right. Luther Burden is stacked behind Mekhi Miller. We'll just run the play forward here a little bit. Obviously, Cook finds a window here in the zone. Big gain here for Burden. Nearly takes it all the way here. Lands really hard on this concrete-like turf, by the way. Not exactly the nicest field in St. Louis history. But what I really want to show you here, let's just freeze it right here at the moment where Brady Cook is deciding to unleash this football. The moment is right about, let's say he's starting to pull back right here. Notice where Luther Burden is. He's about, 5 feet, 6, 7 feet to the right of this defender here. Well, this ball is going to go to the left of this defender. This is just tremendous anticipation here. This is Cook deciding, look at this window here. I know where Luther's going to go. I'm going to anticipate throwing him open here. I'm not going to wait for him to get open. I'm going to throw the ball exactly where I know he's going to be. And guess what? Roll it forward. Perfect timing. Leads to a big gain by Missouri. So to me, Brady Cook, that anticipation there, that level of confidence to just see that window and just rip it in there, I just don't think he was doing that at the beginning of the season. Well, he looks like a different guy the last couple weeks, and I love it. And before the season on this program, I predicted an 8-4 finish for the Tigers, which at the time felt pretty optimistic. But as we sit here today, predicting 8-4, that'd just be 4-4 the rest of the season. That would feel pretty conservative. So you know what? Let's actually take a look at the rest of this Missouri schedule. Guess the lines for the rest of the season. Give us a real feel of the Tigers' odds to have just a truly special season here in 2023. So I want to tell you all about that, but first I want to tell you that these days every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you have to do is add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. LinkedIn Jobs, again, helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for you everydayers, I think I'm going to mostly stick to this taking Friday off schedule. And I think certainly this Saturday, going to go post-game after the Vanderbilt game, a 3 p.m. kickoff. So I can definitely make that happen, get one done on Saturday, a post-game show for all of you. But also on Friday, no Locked On Mizzou, but you will get Locked On College Football kickoff live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Central Time on my YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. All the Locked On Mizzou podcasts, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the SiriusXM app, among many other places. But we got to talk Mizzou football, more Missouri football. As I said over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Tigers nearly 2 touchdown favorites right now. 13 is the spread as we speak here, about 11:30 here on a Monday morning as I record. But the next week against LSU, Missouri at home will probably be underdogs in that ball game, but maybe not as much as you might think, and certainly not as much as you would have thought maybe after week 1 or 2 of the season, because I think we're looking at probably a Kansas State-like line of LSU being favored by maybe 3.5, something like that. I just don't see how, again, with a sellout crowd like we saw against K-State, maybe a night game for this get 1-2, could be a real raucous atmosphere. And obviously, as I've said, Missouri has proven they're a much better offense than we thought after the first couple weeks. We've learned some stuff here the last couple weeks, and frankly, LSU maybe not the type 10 caliber team that maybe we thought earlier in the season as well. So to me, that's a less than a touchdown line. Then you go Lexington, Kentucky the next week. Might the Wildcats be favored? Maybe. I can't see them being favored by much more than a field goal, considering the up and down nature of that team's offense so far. Not sure I can really see Missouri necessarily being favored either, but again, we're talking less than a touchdown there in terms of a line, almost certainly. I would say probably the same thing when South Carolina comes to Mizzou. Now, Georgia, of course, in Athens, well, Tigers are going to be 2 touchdown underdogs in that game, at least, maybe even 20, something like that. Probably won't get to 21 or anything like that. I'd say you get to 21, now you're pushing it if you're an odds maker. I could see it being 17 or 20, though, for sure. That's just the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Tennessee at home, again, a team who's maybe been a little bit disappointing, according to some people's expectations. Certainly Tennessee fans were hoping for another big season after their breakout last year. But you know what? It just doesn't seem like the offense is quite the same with Tennessee. And you know what? I'm thinking, who knows by November 11th how both of these squads will be looking? Who knows what their injury situations will be? But as we stand today, how could Tennessee be favored by more than a field goal or so in Columbia, especially if the Tigers are still playing good football at that moment? It's just hard to see that being a real big spread. Same thing with the Gators at home at Columbia and Arkansas in Fayetteville on that Black Friday. Again, I just think we're looking at a whole handful mess of close games that are coming up here, at least on paper, to finish the season. Tigers should be right in all these ball games. Now, hopefully it'll be a comfortable win over Vanderbilt on Saturday. We shall see. Georgia, obviously that's going to be a really tough hill to climb. But the rest of these ball games, I'm telling you, from what I've seen so far from the Tigers, I think we've got as good a shot to win every single one of these games as we do, as good of a shot as I would have thought. Let's put it that way. I think we're in great shape right now compared to where I thought we would have been even 2-3 weeks ago. Now, obviously, after a really pedestrian start for the Missouri rushing attack, well, by the end of the game, Cody Schrader in particular had a nice statistical game for Missouri, the big 37-yard rushing touchdown there in the fourth quarter. Hit a couple other big runs as well. But I will say, I just thought I really liked the split. It was more or less an even split for Nate Peat and for Cody Schrader just in terms of touches. I just think that's a lot better way to go for Missouri. Because I like Cody Schrader. Don't get me wrong. I just think at the Middle Tennessee game, it seemed like he had 25 to 30 touches in that ball game. And to me, that's just putting way too much on his plate. If he has 15 to 20 touches, I'm actually perfectly okay with that. I just thought we were putting too much on Schrader's plate. And also, I'm a Nate Peat guy, too. I'm a believer in his talent, his ability, and I think the more touches you give him, the better he'll do. And I think both guys are going to benefit from a more even split, hopefully, here, coming from here on out. It was also really encouraging to see a lot of production, I thought, on Saturday from some young guys, particularly on the defensive side of the ball that we heard a lot about, a lot of hype about in fall camp, but we hadn't necessarily seen it translate to the field yet. Well, I thought it did on Saturday for sure, certainly for Drayden Norwood, who ended up actually twisting his ankle pretty bad and having to leave the game. So that was really unfortunate, by the way. Obviously, Missouri already down Ennis Rakestraw in the ball game. Still not totally sure what his injury status is for the upcoming week or the rest of the season. Obviously want to get him back as quickly as possible, but Norwood, when he was in there, to my eyes and to the stats and everything else, seemed to play very, very well in that game. So that was incredibly encouraging. We also saw Marvin Burks, the true freshman from St. Louis, come in, play quite a few snaps as well because, well, frankly, Missouri was just down a lot of defensive backs by the end of that football game. Also, Jordan Harris, a tight end who has very, very little football experience, but a guy who's a really good athlete and somebody that Drinkwitz spoke highly of after the game. So did Cody Schrader, by the way, who shouted him out on his touchdown run, said Jordan Harris gave one of the key blocks on that play for sure, and just said that he showed up huge tonight. Again, I don't know that he was targeted once in the passing game, but a lot of praise for his run blocking from the coach and from the running back. Also, Drinkwitz pointed out that on one play, there was an edge pressure by Memphis, and he says Jordan's got to alert the pressure and execute a call. He's got to relay that information down to the rest of the offensive linemen and does it perfectly, and we execute versus a pressure, which is something that is hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to do for anybody to get that kind of information in that tinny, Trans World Dome, let's be honest. Gets a little loud in there sometimes, especially back when the Greatest Show on Turf used to play. By the way, Brady Cook looking a little bit like Kurt Warner on Saturday, I thought. But seriously, though, you got to be impressed with Jordan Harris. The fact that he seems to be picking up the little parts of the game is for a guy who's a great athlete, who has very, very little football experience. The fact that he's picking up on this stuff at a young age, that's a good sign for his development, I would say. And you know what? I want to shout out some more excellent defensive performances from Saturday because it almost seemed like the defense has raised its level to such a high point that Missouri fans have really high expectations, which is a good thing, obviously. But I don't want it to, when there's the occasional disappointment, hey, we gave up a 3rd and 18 that I wasn't really thrilled about in that second half against Memphis. But let's not let that overshadow some of the excellent play by some of these individual players, including Jaden Jernigan, who I thought really popped out on my rewatch of the game, and also Kris Abrams-Draine. I've seen a lot of people say that he's playing at an all-SEC level this year. Well, you know what? I would totally agree with that, but I would take it even a step further. To me, he's playing at an all-American first-team type level so far this season. So let's talk about Kris and Jaden Jernigan and a little bit more Tiger football, of course. But first, I want to tell you about Athletic Brewing, because now it's time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by the Athletic Brewing Company. And I'm sorry, I know, it's got to be Brady Cook once again. Listen, it could easily be Speedy Johnson, too. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna call an audible here, like Brady Cook might at the line of scrimmage. And I am going to give it to Speedy Johnson, because if that young man is what we think he is, and on film, he sure looks like every bit the outstanding deep threat, a guy who can take the top off the defense. Man, just to pair him with Burden and Theo Weiss, who I really like, that really does change this Missouri offense for the rest of the season. Well, you know what? Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game, because they make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. They're great tasting, they're award-winning, and they beat out full-strength beers in global competition. So you know what? You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy it online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Well, Kris Abrams-Draine is just a classic example of a good evaluation by me that is totally and completely backed up by all statistics. I've been on the Kris Abrams-Draine and Ennis Rakestraw, by the way. I've been on the, wow, these guys are really awesome train since all the way back at the beginning of last season. And again, I agree with everybody who says Abrams-Draine is playing at an all-SEC level. Frankly, I thought he was a little bit overlooked in the preseason honors, and I think he's showing that right now. In fact, in week 4, without his running buddy there, Ennis Rakestraw, well, he was targeted 5 times in the ball game, and frankly, that was probably 5 times too many, because on those 5 passes his way, he allowed 2 catches for a measly 5 yards. He's also a really good tackler as well, had a pass deflection, had another interception, by the way. Didn't have one all of last season, which was fluky, if anything, and maybe a result of people realizing maybe we should stop throwing it over this guy's way. But he has 2 picks on the year so far, both in the last 2 weeks, by the way. So a nice trend there for Abrams-Draine. But again, here's a guy who just passes the eye test. You just watch it on film, and then you go and look at the statistics to sort of confirm what you're seeing, and you realize, oh, this guy, you look at the quarterback rating for when people start throwing his way, he makes actual FBS scholarship quarterbacks. Suddenly, when they're throwing his way, it's basically me with like a 3-snapper buzz or something being out there on the field, and my deformed shoulder, which is not exactly a laser rocket arm at this point in my life. So Kris Abrams-Draine, if anything, I still think he's a little bit underrated nationally. I think people around the conference, if you're watching Missouri's film, you're going to figure it out pretty fast, but I think Missouri should be honestly putting on the All-American campaign for that young man. Obviously, Luther Burden as well, and heck, maybe Brady Cook if he keeps this stuff up. How about that? And finally, I do just want to shout out Jaden Jernigan, who is a transfer from Oklahoma State last season, one of many really good interior defensive linemen for Missouri. Sometimes I think him and Christian Williams, Josh Landry, we kind of take them for granted because they're really impactful players that, well, just the nature of being an interior lineman, you're just not going to show up as much as the guys on the outside of the defense. But Jernigan had multiple rushes in this ball game that completely blew up plays, at least a couple where he just completely blew up the play all by himself. So I just want to point out that those big guys on the inside don't always get the most ink or maybe words into this microphone from this here podcaster, but those are really important guys, and they've been playing at a high level for Missouri for a couple years now. And thanks again for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for you everydayers, on tomorrow's program, hopefully I'll have some good news on the Missouri injury front. We should be getting some updates here. We may even be getting some as I speak here. That's often the timing that comes down when I record this podcast. But regardless, I'll have all the information and news, Vanderbilt previews, all kinds of stuff this week. More film study, the whole deal right here on Locked On Mizzou.